devices in my spine to fuse it. After the surgery, he said that everything had gone great, but I was no better. I was possibly even worse.
You moved here from, was it Tennessee? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you just started, you did all your schooling there and then came?
Yeah, med school, PhD, graduate school, residency, fellowship in spine.
In a field meant to heal and protect, these doctors chose a darker path. Their medical licenses became weapons of destruction as they betrayed their sacred oath in the most horrific ways imaginable. Dr. Christopher Dunch even deliberately hurt his own patients during surgery, leaving some with life-changing injuries and others not even surviving the tragic ordeal. The shock on their faces when justice finally arrived? Priceless. Let's dive in.
News, Dr. Farid Fata pleading guilty to a long list of charges. He's the cancer specialist accused of bilking Medicare out of millions of dollars.
In the wealthy suburbs of Detroit, Dr. Farid Fata built a medical empire that spanned 7 cancer treatment centers. His Michigan hematology-oncology practice became the largest private cancer practice in Michigan. Patients flocked to him, believing his reputation as a brilliant doctor who could save them from cancer's grip. Little did they know that behind his caring smile lurked something far more sinister than the disease they feared. In August 2013, federal agents stormed into Fata's clinic and led the respected oncologist away in handcuffs. What started as a tip from a whistleblower unraveled into a horrifying discovery. For years, Fata had been telling healthy patients that they had cancer when they didn't. Even worse, he was giving unnecessary chemotherapy to patients with real cancer, harming their bodies beyond what their treatment required. One patient walked into Fata's office with a simple complaint and walked out with a cancer diagnosis and orders to start chemotherapy immediately. Another was told his cancer had spread to his bones when his body was completely cancer-free. A nurse who worked at his clinic became suspicious when she noticed patients receiving treatment schedules that made no medical sense. The treatments were brutal. Toxic drugs pumping into the veins of people who never needed them in the first place.
Teddy Howard went through rounds of chemotherapy after Fata's diagnosis and now needs a lifetime of medicine to stay healthy.
What really makes me angry is the fact that he lied.
The scale of Fata's scheme was staggering. Investigators uncovered that he had deliberately misdiagnosed hundreds of patients and subjected them to unnecessary treatments. Some received dangerous chemotherapy for cancers they never had. Others with terminal illnesses were given false hope of recovery, while Fata maximized his profits. One patient received 155 chemotherapy treatments over 2 years, treatments that were completely unnecessary. Many lost their hair, their strength, and their dignity. Their bodies became battlegrounds in a war against a disease some of them never actually had. FBI agents poured through thousands of patient files and found the same disturbing pattern again and again. Healthy people being diagnosed with blood cancers that could only be verified by Fata himself, then subjected to years of expensive treatments. Fata's motive was as simple as it was cold-blooded: money. For every infusion, every unnecessary procedure, every false diagnosis, the doctor billed insurance companies and Medicare. The fraudulent claims totaled $34 million. While his patients suffered from treatments they didn't need, Fata purchased a $3 million mansion and built his own cancer treatment drug pharmacy to increase his profits even further.
Oakland Township House. The FBI raided Dr. Fata's home and offices last Tuesday. He was arrested, accused of giving chemo and other treatments to cancer patients.
In September 2014, Fata pleaded guilty to 13 counts of healthcare fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to receive kickbacks, and 2 counts of money laundering. The doctor who once commanded respect in the medical community now stood exposed as one of the most heartless medical fraudsters in American history. On July 10, 2015, Fata entered the courtroom for sentencing. A once respected doctor now sat slumped in his seat as the weight of his crimes pressed down upon him.
Fata stared blankly while nearly 24 patients and family members read impact statements, including Laura Stetfeld, whose father died under Fata's care.
When Judge Paul Borman announced the 45-year sentence, Fata's composure finally broke. The doctor, who had shown little emotion throughout the trial, visibly trembled. His knees buckled, and his attorneys had to steady him as the reality sank in. He would likely die behind bars. Outside the courthouse, patients who had lost years of their lives to unnecessary treatments held signs and embraced each other. Their bodies were damaged by toxic drugs they never needed, but at last, they had the validation that they weren't crazy. They had been victims of a doctor who had traded his oath for greed. While Dr. Fada's crimes were calculated for financial gain, our next doctor received an even longer sentence for his horrific actions.
Sir, we begin tonight with a Denver doctor facing additional criminal charges. Dr. Stephen Matthews is now facing 10 criminal cases related to alleged date rape. Prior to today, Matthews had only been facing one charge.
Stephen Matthews seemed like a respected professional until investigators uncovered the disturbing truth about what he was doing to his own patients. In upscale Denver neighborhoods, Dr. Stephen Matthews was known as a skilled cardiologist with a thriving practice. With his charming smile and impressive medical credentials, he quickly gained the trust of his community. By day, he saved lives in the operating room, but as the sun set, a different side of Dr. Matthews emerged, one that would eventually shock the entire medical community and leave a trail of victims in his wake. In June 2023, police arrived at Matthews' luxurious Denver home with a search warrant. The respected doctor was placed in handcuffs as investigators combed through his property. What triggered this sudden fall from grace? Detectives had been quietly building a case after several women came forward with disturbing stories about their encounters with the charming doctor. Matthews had been using dating apps like Hinge to meet women. He'd invite them to his home, where he'd offer them drinks. But police discovered something sinister in these seemingly innocent date nights. The women reported feeling suddenly dizzy, experiencing memory blackouts, and waking up the next morning feeling confused and violated.
You think you were drugged at his home?
Absolutely, I do.
A Denver police detective recounted what this woman said happened at the hands of Matthews after the two had been drinking.
One woman described texting her mother during a date with Matthews, saying she felt strangely intoxicated after just one drink. By morning, she had no memory of sending the message. As investigators dug deeper, a calculated pattern emerged. Matthews wasn't just a doctor who crossed boundaries. He was methodically targeting women using his medical knowledge. Police found that Matthews had been secretly adding powerful sedatives to women's drinks. These weren't random acts, but part of a carefully planned strategy. The search of his home revealed hidden sedatives and evidence that Matthews had been researching how these substances affect memory. Even more shocking, investigators discovered Matthews had been recording his crimes, creating a digital record of his victims' most vulnerable moments without their knowledge or consent. His motive appeared to be a disturbing desire for control and power. As a cardiologist, Matthews was respected and trusted. Behind closed doors, he used his medical knowledge to take advantage of women when they were most vulnerable. When victims tried to piece together what had happened, Matthews would gaslight them, suggesting they had simply had too much to drink, or that they were making things up. What made this case particularly chilling was how Matthews tried to cover his tracks. When he realized police were investigating him, he attempted to destroy evidence by factory resetting his phone and deleting digital records. But forensic experts were able to recover crucial information that sealed his fate.
Stephen Matthews, the Denver cardiologist charged with drugging or date 13 women he met online, sat handcuffed in court listening to a recitation of the alleged sex assaults.
In August 2024, after an emotional trial, a jury found Matthews guilty on multiple counts of assault and administering substances to commit a crime. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital records, testimony from multiple victims, and the doctor's own attempts to hide evidence all pointed to his guilt. On October 25, 2024, Matthews entered the courtroom for sentencing. The once confident doctor now appeared small and defeated. The gallery was filled with brave survivors who had come forward to ensure justice was served. For hours, they shared how their encounters with Matthews had changed their lives forever. When Judge Eric Johnson announced the staggering 158-year sentence, the courtroom fell silent. Matthews' knees buckled, and he gripped the table to steady himself. The color drained from his face as he realized he would spend the rest of his life behind bars.
It would be improper if you did not serve a sentence for each victim individually. The total number of years are 158 years in prison. This matter is concluded.
One survivor later described the moment as watching a mask finally slip off. The doctor, who had carefully maintained his professional image for years, was finally exposed for what he truly was. As officers led him away in handcuffs, several survivors embraced each other, tears streaming down their faces. Not from sadness, but from the relief of knowing Matthews could never harm anyone again. While Matthews used his medical knowledge to harm those who trusted him, our next doctor's actions reached an even more disturbing level.
It has been described as a house of horrors, this West Philadelphia abortion clinic where 69-year-old Dr. Kermit Gosnell operated for more than 30 years.
The children were born and then killed.
Dr. Kermit Gosnell operated what prosecutors would later call a house of horrors, a facility where medical standards were abandoned and human life was treated with shocking disregard. For over 30 years, Dr. Kermit Gosnell ran the Women's Medical Society Clinic in a rundown brick building in West Philadelphia. From the outside, it looked unremarkable, just another medical office in a struggling neighborhood. Inside those walls, however, something was terribly wrong. The doctor who claimed to help women in need was hiding dark secrets that would eventually shock the entire nation and earn him the name no doctor ever wants: serial killer. In February 2010, federal agents and local police raided Gosnell's clinic. They weren't looking for evidence of medical wrongdoing. They were investigating reports of illegal prescription drug sales. What they found inside stopped them in their tracks. The clinic was filthy. Medical equipment lay broken and unused. Bloodstains covered the floors and walls. Cat hair was everywhere. The smell of urine filled the air. But it wasn't just the disgusting conditions that horrified investigators. In a search of the property, they discovered something much worse. 47 containers with human remains stored in freezers and refrigerators throughout the building. Some dated back for years. This wasn't standard medical waste. This was evidence of something far more sinister. Health officials immediately shut down the clinic. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a trail of complaints against Gosnell stretching back decades. State regulators had received multiple reports about terrible conditions at the clinic, but no one had acted. Some patients had developed serious infections from unsterilized equipment. Others had been permanently injured during procedures. One woman had even died. Many of these patients were poor, desperate, and had nowhere else to turn. Gosnell charged them hundreds or thousands of dollars in cash. Even more disturbing, staff member testimonials reveal that Gosnell was accused of ending the lives of infants after they were delivered. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. According to testimony, it had happened hundreds of times over the years.
But this former patient told KYW last year she endured a botched procedure by Gosnell and will never forget his words to her afterward.
Wake up, wake up. I need you to put your clothes on. I have an ambulance waiting for you outside. I did something to you and I don't know what I did.
One employee described how some of the babies had moved or cried before Gosnell ended their lives. The clinic employed untrained staff who administered powerful drugs to patients. The medicine cabinet contained expired drugs, and essential emergency equipment was either broken or missing entirely. Gosnell's motive appeared to be simple: money. His clinic brought in an estimated $1.8 million each year, much of it in cash payments. He cut every corner possible to maximize profits. Untrained staff worked for low wages, equipment was never replaced, and safety protocols were ignored. While his clinic deteriorated into squalor, Gosnell lived in a large house at the shore and owned multiple properties. In January 2011, Gosnell was charged with 8 counts of murder, 7 for infants who were born alive and killed at his clinic, and 1 for a patient named Karnamaya Mongar, who died from an overdose of anesthesia during a procedure. Gosnell was also charged with over 200 counts of violating Pennsylvania's reproductive laws and other regulations.
Because I called him. I said, "What do you do to my daughter?" I said, "My daughter's about to die." I said, "What in the world you..." He said, "Russ, take her to the hospital, take her to the hospital." I said, "I am taking her to the hospital now."
The trial began in March 2013. Prosecutors presented evidence from the clinic, testimony from former employees, and medical records of victims. The defense argued that none of the infants had been born alive, and that Gosnell had been providing a service to a community that had few medical options. On May 13, 2013, after 10 days of deliberation, the jury reached its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of 3 infants, guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Karnamaya Mongar, and guilty of hundreds of lesser charges. 2 days later, Gosnell returned to court for sentencing. To avoid the death penalty, he made a deal with prosecutors to give up his right to appeal. The judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years. As the sentence was read, Gosnell's composed exterior finally cracked. His shoulders slumped forward. The man who had shown no emotion when faced with evidence of his crimes now looked defeated and old.
Initially, he appeared not to have a reaction, Jake, and I actually stayed behind after the verdict came in and walked up to the well of the courtroom, and I did look at Dr. Gosnell, and he appeared, in my view, to be shocked.
Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered to hear the news. Some held signs, others embraced each other. Justice had finally come for the victims of the doctor who had betrayed his oath to do no harm in the most horrific way imaginable. Gosnell's disregard for human life earned him 3 life sentences, but our next doctor took medical malpractice to an almost unbelievable level.
During the surgery, she started bleeding.
A problem? Dr. Dunch doesn't think so.
He just sewed her up and said she's okay.
But Kelly was far from okay.
Dr. Christopher Dunch didn't just harm patients through negligence. He actively injured them during surgery, leaving a trail of damaged lives in his wake. On July 2011, a new neurosurgeon arrived in Dallas with a resume that sparkled with promise. Dr. Christopher Dunch had completed his training at prestigious institutions and boasted of revolutionary surgical techniques. Patients with debilitating back pain flocked to him, hoping his skilled hands would provide relief. No one could have predicted that between 2011 and 2013, this rising star would operate on 38 patients and leave 33 of them seriously injured for life, earning him a chilling nickname, Dr. Death. The first signs of trouble appeared almost immediately. On December 30th, 2011, Dunch performed a simple fusion on Lee Passmore, who woke up paralyzed with uncontrollable pain. In January 2012, Jerry Summers, Dunch's childhood friend, went in for a routine cervical fusion and woke up quadriplegic. On February 19, 2012, Kelly Martin entered the operating room for a minor procedure and bled to death from a sliced vertebral artery. By March 2012, fellow surgeons were horrified. After 3 catastrophic surgeries in just 3 months, Baylor Hospital asked Dunch to resign, but provided a letter of reference. Within weeks, he was operating at Dallas Medical Center, where he botched 4 more surgeries in just 2 weeks. One doctor who observed Dunch was shocked. The neurosurgeon seemed to have little understanding of basic anatomy, making cuts in places no trained surgeon would approach. Despite mounting concerns, Dunch kept operating. Between July 2012 and June 2013, he gained privileges at 3 more hospitals. When questioned, he blamed others: faulty equipment, incompetent staff, unusual patient anatomy. The Texas Medical Board, despite receiving multiple complaints, took nearly 2 years to stop him. What doctors discovered went beyond mere incompetence. In several surgeries, Dunch deliberately placed screws and hardware into muscle instead of bone, doing nothing to fix patients' problems while creating new ones.
These devices in my spine to fuse it. After the surgery, he said that everything had gone great, but I was no better. I was possibly even worse.
The case of Mary Eford became central to understanding Dunch's actions. After her routine fusion, she woke up with severe pain. Dr. Robert Henderson, a veteran surgeon called in to help, was stunned by what he found when he reopened her spine. The hardware was installed in all the wrong places. Screw holes had been drilled in areas no trained surgeon would touch. Her nerve roots had been completely severed, damage that looked intentional rather than accidental. Dunch's motive remained a mystery. Was it staggering incompetence? Was he impaired by drugs or alcohol? Investigators later discovered a disturbing email Dunch had sent in which he wrote that he was ready to become a cold-blooded killer. As authorities built their case, they uncovered more about Dunch's past. Despite his impressive resume, his surgical training had been spotty. Former colleagues reported erratic behavior and substance problems. They described marathon surgery sessions after which Dunch appeared disoriented. Yet somehow, he kept practicing, moving from victim to victim.
You moved here from, was it Tennessee, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so you just started, you did all your schooling there and then you came?
Yeah, med school, PhD, graduate school, residency, fellowship in spine.
In July 2015, after harming over 30 patients, including 2 who died, Dunch's medical license was finally revoked. For his victims, this wasn't enough. In 2017, Dunch went on trial for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The weapon? His scalpel and surgical tools. Prosecutors focused on what he had done to Mary Eford, arguing his actions went far beyond negligence and entered the realm of criminal behavior. On February 20th, 2017, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. As it was read, Dunch sat perfectly still, his expression blank. But when the judge announced the life sentence, the mask finally slipped. His eyes widened in shock. The doctor, who had known such confidence in the operating room, now looked small and defeated as he realized he would spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Jury, having found the defendant, Christopher Daniel Dunch, guilty of injury to an elderly individual as charged in the indictment, unanimously assessed his punishment and confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for life.
It took the jury about an hour to decide. Life in prison for a doctor convicted of maiming and killing his patients.
Victims and their families filled the courtroom. Some were in wheelchairs, permanent reminders of their encounters with Dr. Death. As Dunch was led away in handcuffs, soft sobs could be heard from the gallery. Not tears of sadness, but of relief that the doctor who had caused so much suffering would never practice medicine again. While Dr. Dunch used his surgical tools to harm patients directly, our next doctor found an even more insidious way to spread suffering. Dr. Reynaldo Ortiz didn't just harm his own patients. He tampered with IV bags that would be used by other doctors, causing a wave of mysterious medical emergencies that baffled an entire hospital.
Dr. Ortiz cloaked himself in the white coat of a healer, but instead of curing pain, he inflicted it.
A doctor is convicted of intentionally tampering with IV bags full of medicine.
In summer 2022, a wave of panic swept through Baylor, Scott, and White Surgicare in Dallas. Healthy patients suddenly suffered heart-stopping emergencies during routine procedures. Medical staff scrambled to save lives as one patient after another crashed without warning. Something sinister was happening at the facility, but no one could figure out what, until security cameras revealed a trusted anesthesiologist with a suspicious pattern of behavior. Dr. Reynaldo Ortiz would soon become known as the medical terrorist, whose actions shocked the entire healthcare community. On June 21, 2012, Dr. Melanie Kaspar, a beloved anesthesiologist, felt unwell at home after a busy day at the surgical center. To rehydrate, she grabbed an IV bag she had brought home from work, a common practice among medical professionals. Within moments of inserting the IV line, her heart began racing uncontrollably. She called out to her husband, who rushed to her side, but it was too late. By the time paramedics arrived, Kaspar was dead from a massive heart attack. The medical examiner initially ruled it natural causes, but her colleagues couldn't shake their suspicions. Around the same time, other disturbing incidents were occurring at the surgical center where Kaspar worked.
Jack Adlerstein almost died from the bags secretly filled with dangerous drugs by Dr. Reynaldo Ortiz.
An 18-year-old boy having shoulder surgery unexpectedly went into cardiac arrest on the operating table. A middle-aged woman's heart stopped during a routine cosmetic procedure. Within just 16 days, 11 patients suffered severe cardiac complications and surgeries where such events should never happen. Something wasn't right. Hospital administrators reviewed security footage from the facility and spotted something alarming. Dr. Reynaldo Ortiz was repeatedly seen taking IV bags from the warming cabinet, walking away with them to a hallway without cameras, then returning them minutes later. Investigators see several unused IV bags from the facility. Lab tests revealed a shocking truth. The bags had been injected with heart-stopping drugs like epinephrine and bupivacaine, medications that could cause immediate cardiac arrest if delivered directly into the bloodstream. The puncture marks in the bags were tiny, but unmistakable. Someone had used a syringe to add these dangerous substances when no one was looking.
Patients began experiencing cardiac emergencies 2 days after Dr. Ortiz was notified of a disciplinary inquiry at that facility where he deviated from the standard of care. Dr. Ortiz, who had a history of disciplinary actions against him, told other doctors the center was trying to crucify him.
All evidence pointed to Ortiz. The timeline matched perfectly. His visits to the warming cabinet corresponded with the tainted IV bags. Even more telling, no cardiac events occurred on days when Ortiz wasn't working. Investigators dug into his background and discovered a troubling history. He had been on disciplinary probation for failing to properly care for a patient in distress. Just days before the poisonings began, he had been confronted about another medical mistake. His motive became clear: revenge against the facility and colleagues who had reported his mistakes. Ortiz apparently believed that causing patient emergencies would reflect poorly on the surgical center, not on him personally. In a calculated move, he never used the tainted bags on his own patients, making the connection harder to trace. What made his actions even more horrifying was how he simply stood by, watching other doctors frantically try to save patients who had received his poisoned IVs. In September 2022, federal agents arrested Ortiz outside his home. Investigators had compiled overwhelming evidence, the security footage, the tainted IV bags, the pattern of incidents matching his schedule, and his history of disciplinary problems at the facility. He was charged with tampering with consumer products resulting in death and intentional drug adulteration. The trial began in March 2024. Over 2 weeks, jurors saw the damning security footage and heard how Ortiz had placed his colleagues and innocent patients in deadly situations. Scientists explained how the heart-stopping drugs had been methodically injected into the IV bags, requiring medical knowledge and deliberate intent.
Her husband of 30 years, John Kaspar, attended today's hearing.
It's just been a difficult summer, and this new information just stirs up all the emotions all over again. So it's.
On April 15th, 2024, after just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Ortiz guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was even more dramatic. Victims and their families filled the courtroom, many still dealing with long-term heart damage from their brushes with death. Dr. Kaspar's husband, fighting back tears, described finding his wife collapsed on their bathroom floor. On November 20th, 2024, Judge David Godbey announced a sentence that made headlines across the nation: 190 years in federal prison. The doctor, who had brought others to the brink of death, now faced what amounted to a death sentence of his own.
Ortiz himself had no visible reaction when the verdict was read. He was wearing a mask, as he has during most of the trial. In the gallery, though, people were hugging, some were crying, someone even broke out clapping as Ortiz was let out.
Judge Godbey didn't hold back in his assessment, calling Ortiz's crimes among the most horrific he had ever seen in his career. As Ortiz was led away in handcuffs, the victims and their families embraced each other. The medical community in Dallas could finally breathe easier, knowing the doctor who had turned their healing center into a place of fear would never practice medicine again. From prestigious medical degrees to life sentences, these doctors traded their healing hands for weapons of destruction. Their shocked faces in court show the moment they realized no white coat could shield them from justice. While their victims continue to suffer, these medical monsters will spend decades behind bars, paying for their betrayal of the most sacred trust. The medical world holds many more dark secrets waiting to be exposed.